Mr. Juan Padró, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having
Heroic Hospitality. You are a leader in the industry, and I'm just so happy to have you on the show today. And it's a true pleasure to have gotten to know you over the last 10 years. And
it's been 10 years, right?
Yeah, it's been 10 years, and you know, I made it a point to try to meet you right when you came to town, and super glad I did. And I really appreciate our friendship and what you've brought to Denver and what you're continuing to bring to Denver, which is, I mean, at this point, it's like 14 different businesses, 14 or 15, like currently right now, but like a lot of like 8 or 9 concepts. And Mr. Oso, I want you to fill in the gaps here for a second. So Mr. Oso, A5, Senior Bear, Ashkara, I mean, Highland Tap and Burger. Okay, you take it from here.
Yeah, so we're about to open our 20th and 12 concepts. 18 of them in Denver, 2 in New Orleans.
I missed the New Orleans ones. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have, as you mentioned, Mr. Oso here in Rhino. We've got A5 downtown, and then in Lohi we have Senior Bear, Ashkara, Bardot, Island Tap, Fox and the Hen. And soon to be Kamoya the first week of October.
With Corey Baker,
with Corey Baker.
Man, great friend of mine.
Yeah.
And Jana, I think worked for you.
She still does. She's worked for me for
at Bardot, right?
over a decade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she was
she worked for me at Old Major. Oh, I mean, even before then. Yeah.
So she was at Lower 48. She opened and closed Lower 48.
Yeah, she's.
I mean, my heart
great.
melts whenever I see her.
Yeah,
so.
Love Jana Baker. She's been great. She took like 6 months to go hang out with Corey in Crested Butte on a project, but otherwise she's been there every week. So,
good.
Yeah. So over in Wash Park we have another Mr. Oso, and then we have the Aviano Coffees in Cherry Creek. We have Forget Me Not. We have iPoppy.
Yep.
As well, which are cocktail bars.
I love Forget Me Not. What's about a year old now?
Forget Me Not is a little over 2 years old.
Time's flying.
And then Red Tops, we opened up in Jeff Park, which is like a Detroit-style pizza, Italian-American concept, completely different business than a restaurant, which we didn't understand. So that's a interesting topic of conversation. Yeah, and then we have behind Kamoya there'll be like Bar Kumos, which is sort of like a Japanese cocktail bar, loungy, type hangout. Yeah, so it'll be open late. You can eat there late afterward, so.
And that's the old Tony P spot, right?
That is the old Tony P's on 32nd.
How'd you acquire that? How did that come?
He just called up and said, "Hey, listen, I'm doing almost all to go. I don't need this kind of space.
Yeah.
And I don't want to put it on the market. I'd rather you just take it." And that's what we did.
That's amazing. Yeah. I had a drink there at the new Tony P's, and we started talking with him a little bit. I had never met him before. He seemed like a real humble, nice guy.
Yeah, he's been around for a long time. He's from here, So
yeah, I don't know him well at all.
Long time legacy family, Denver.
Yeah, yeah. What most excites you about that concept at that location?
I mean, the location's great. Partnering with Corey Baker and
so talented.
Yeah, and Max is really good at getting these things open and contributing, but letting the guys kind of run with what their concept is and refining things where necessary. So just to kind of see all that come together. It's definitely probably the most designed place that we have.
Oh, really?
And so Abby Plonky, who I know you know, is from Maximalist, is handling that piece of it. And I think that neighborhood, still could use like more adult bars.
Yep.
Lady Jane is awesome, and of course Williams and Graham, but that's really it on the adult bar circuit. So and so. We're hoping to contribute, with that particular concept, which is, we'll do like noodle work and katsu sandos and things like that late night. We have a DJ booth in there. There'll be music. We have 2 of the 3 cabaret licenses in North Denver, so we will be activating Highland Tap late night again.
Really? So, fantastic.
Yeah, just because we have all that space.
How do you activate Highland Tap? In that spirit, like, what do you mean?
So for many years we did live music there on Wednesday nights, and it kind of became a thing. It was almost like a Lower East Side New York sort of like low ceiling kind of. And Garrett Sayers from the Motet was the resident there, and Joey Porter, and we Kyle Hollingsworth from String Cheese playing there all the time. And
cool. So live band setup.
All live bands, and guys from everyone from Lettuce to Disco Biscuits to then OAR showed up one day and decided to play, and they that the street kind of got shut down. So many people, because somebody tweeted it out. It was sort of like an in the know thing. And then we ended up buying a music venue downtown, which was a terrible idea because I don't like that business, and I wasn't any good at it. So we moved the live music down there.
That's amazing.
So yeah, good stuff. And
so where in that is will you pop up the music just so I could?
We used to do it on there's two sort of 2,000 square foot spaces that are connected there. So historically, it was done on the dining side, but I don't think that'll be the case this time. I think we'll probably do it on the bar side, activate the bar there a little bit more, and awesome. We right before COVID started, we started shutting down a little bit early, just because there was some activity in the neighborhood that we weren't comfortable with our young women, kind of working there by themselves. And they were kind of on an island by themselves, but that's changed. There's more places up there now, and so
I mean, you've been an anchor in that neighborhood for over a decade, and
contributed
in such a positive way.
Yeah. We opened up Highland in 2010, September of 2010. So it's been around a while.
Yeah, it has.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah,
really cool.
And without it, none of the other stuff would have happened. It basically funded the growth of the company for 10 years. That one store.
It's amazing. And Culinary Collective is that your umbrella company for all of your hospitality ventures, or is it just for a handful or a select few? Maybe tell us a little bit about.
Culinary Creative Group it's a C corp, and so we restructured the company about 2.5 years ago. And really, what I wanted to do was stop thinking about it as a restaurant group and think about it as an incubator. And I was a headhunter in the '90s and during the .com era. And one of the interesting things that happened there was you had technology was just went from these big mainframe computers that you saw on Star Trek to what they called client server, which is what businesses had, just to do internal type work, to the World Wide Web.
Yeah.
And when the web came, all these VCs, venture capitalists, and angel investors, and investment banks, and just started throwing hundreds of millions and billions of dollars at these startups. So whether you were selling pet supplies or records online or, cheese online, didn't really matter. You were getting these huge amounts of money. Well, the problem was that nobody over the age of 22 really understood the modern development languages. Mm-hmm. So it's like, let's put on the brakes. I can't give $100 million to a 22-year-old, and I've got to figure out how to de-risk. And what they did was they basically created these. They would buy like a city block in San Francisco or New York or Boston, and they would bring all these young entrepreneurs under one umbrella, and they would provide them with services. And so they did all the administrative work, the payroll, the marketing, sales, and they basically said, hey, Sally Smith, you're really good at coding in Java. You just put your head down, and we're going to make you a millionaire many times over, but we just want you to do that, and we'll take care of all the rest. So right around 2013, when we opened up Old Major, we really realized that the industry was backwards, completely backwards. It wasn't structured the right way. And so we started talking about ways which we could create a path forward for people. Because one of the things that was happening was parents were coming in and saying, hey, thanks so much for giving my kid a job until they get a real one. Like comments like that, which really didn't sit with me very well. So we decided to kind of turn the industry upside down, and that's what we call it. Very simply, we just call it a path forward, and restructure the company into divisions. So we have a Latin division, cocktail, coffee, Americana, and then specialty. And that's the path forward for chefs. So they go from working under max in specialty to creating a concept. We're an equitable business, so then they are able to acquire equity as part of their income. And then if they have a concept that they want to replicate, they can replicate their equity in the stores and create wealth for themselves. And so we've created this kind of really cool business model that's allowed people to grow. So, we had a young chef, and I'll leave his name out of it for the purposes because I'm going to talk about money. But, who, when he opened his first restaurant underneath us, this was a 52-seat restaurant. He was making $60,000 a year. This was 2017. 2022, his W-2 says $220,000. Because he's got equity distributions, he's grown multiple stores, and so he's got more responsibility as a division lead. So he makes a higher base. He has bonus compensation. So all of that combined, really moves the meter for him. So,
amazing.
Yeah,
that's amazing. So does Culinary does that company manage, or not manage, but
so we have a management company.
Yep.
Right. So CCG Management Company.
Okay.
Is just myself and Katie, Kevin, and Max, and Hazem Oof. So there's 5 of us in that group, and we manage. We basically, we don't take any salaries out of our businesses. We try to leave as much money in the business for the kids that we can do. You know. And by the way, I'm from Massachusetts, so I call everybody a kid regardless of age. But you know, the idea is, you know, is to focus on our activism. Right. We employ the most vulnerable people in America, right? We employ single moms, we employ immigrants, people of color. And so, you know, if we can break economic cycles, if we have a model that functions properly, because, you know, you got 1 in 5 Americans that, you know, work in hospitality.
Yep.
You know, 1 in 10's in a restaurant, right? I mean, we can solve a lot of problems if we get this right, and we have to focus on it. And it's the problem when you don't focus on it, and you view it, and the government views it this way, and I think a lot of society views it this way, is, you know, when you view it as a stepping stone, you don't put the time and the attention necessary into fixing the problem. And so we've really focused heavily on that, and it's allowed us to grow, and it's allowed us to retain our top talent, and it's allowed us to create, you know, really meaningful work for people. And, you know, I've got Mexican immigrants that are sending their kids to college, first generation, you know, and they're able to afford it. You know, and then of course we have the service charge model that we employ that people have very misunderstood, but is super important because we're a credit-based system in America, right? So you have verifiable income, and people are qualifying for car loans and home loans, and, like, you know, it's a real thing.
Yeah. For the listeners, what it's a tactic that you employ to retain some of these employees that you're speaking of that have been legacy employees for you?
Well, I think there's multiple ways to get equity in the company. So one is to create, if you're a creator, whether it's a cocktail creator or whether you're a chef or, you know, whatever.
So if you're working in one of your restaurants, you can say, Juan, this is something I want to do. This is something I can offer.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on it?
Yes.
And that's how the conversation starts.
That's how the conversation starts, and that's typically a chef. And so Max is brought into that conversation, and we work with them in that specialty division, which is where all the one-off restaurants are. When they're ready to go off on their own and the concept seems to be ready, then we invest in it. We raise the capital. We take for the kid, we take the risk out of it. You know,
of course,
doesn't mean there's no risk. There's risk, but we're taking it on.
And I know there's risk because I know that you're a man that values time.
Yeah.
And a lot of this risk, it comes in the form of time.
Yeah.
Is there any other like core value? Just me making the assumption that time is one of your core values, that you like, that's a no compromise for you with the people that you surround yourself with, or some of these folks that are coming into your fold?
Okay, so there's 2 different questions there. So in terms of you know, having a mission, vision, value sort of, you know, focus, you know, I think our activism probably stands at the top of that list, you know, so we consider ourselves an activist business, and, you know, just community driven, and, you know, just very intentional with every decision that we make. And we want to do what's in the best interest of our people, and we want to do what's in the best interest of our community. Like, that's super important to us. In terms of tactic, I think that's what you asked. Like,
yeah, like a specific, like something that the listeners could take away, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you know, pigs get slaughtered, you know, and at the end of the day, it's not about, I don't, you know, money doesn't really have any inherent value. You know, that's my philosophy, at least. I think what you do with it is where the value is. And, you know, I think that if you're chasing dollars, you know, you're probably going down the wrong path. But if you're clear about your mission, and you're focused on achieving that, I think that's probably the best thing to do. And money's a follower. It'll follow.
Money's a follower.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll ask the question in a different way. So, you know, time is something that you value, and that is a part of the way that you go about life is really protecting that time. And so for me, one of the things I find that's a constant in the people that I surround myself with is that they're continuous learners. They're always interested in things, and they're always. So what other, like, anchor in your world,
like
professional,
values.
like a value?
Yeah, there's 3 things.
Yeah.
So Intellectual curiosity is certainly one of them, which is, I think,
I hold that dear.
About. Empathy, I think, is very important, and we require our kids to get out and travel and immerse themselves in other cultures and seek to understand. I think that is really good for creating an empathetic work environment. And then emotional maturity, emotional intelligence.
Yeah, you could be 22 and have it.
Yeah, that's not an age thing,
yeah.
But in a business where you're seeing thousands of people a week, you're going to see a little bit of everything. And making sure that you have the ability to deal with those situations maturely, thoughtfully, and with empathy, I think is super important. So I think if you have those three characteristics, you're probably going to end up being a partner in our company. I think if you have two, you'll be perfectly successful, and you might even be able to hang out with one. But all three that's the magic. Those are the magic people.
That's what moves the needle forward in your company.
Yeah, for sure.
Through your lens. And, you mentioned you were a recruiter. You said headhunter, recruiter. Yeah. Either way. Yeah. What are some of the, what did you take from that experience, and how has it influenced your current, where you currently are? Like, you have a team of people that hire another team of people that then are a team of people, right? And so what about that period of time in your life and that job, because it sounds like a job it was for you or career for you in your time, what are one or two things that you got from that allow you to attract great talent outside of just doing what you say you're going to do, which you do, and that's why you. I
would say the values we just talked about were a big part of that, because I had an opportunity. I did executive search as well on Wall Street, and had an opportunity to see how the great CEOs build teams and what was important to them, and how to really evaluate performance, and ethics.
Yeah.
I think that's a big part of it. I would say that as I sort of matured in that world, I ended up in the management consulting space. And what I learned there was, pretty simply, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong fucking room. I mean, that's probably the number one piece of advice I've ever gotten that has gotten me the furthest. Don't be afraid to hire people smarter than you, better than you. So and because the idea is to move forward. So
when you're going through the interview process and you've trained your HR team or your general managers or your directors.
Yep.
What does that training look like if you had 3 or 4 of these values? One is, if you're hiring a server, is this server, what are some of, how do you encourage your team to look at the hiring process?
I mean, through the lens of the 3 values and asking questions that are going to bring out examples of, a time when, for example, if you're interviewing as a server, you may ask something like, give me in every restaurant there are unethical things that occur. So give me an example of one of those things that happened in your restaurant that you were aware of, and how did you handle that? Right.
It's a great question.
Yeah. So I think that's a really just understanding somebody's thought process. And by the way, a good answer is, I didn't and I wish I did. Okay. Or
that's honest transparency. That's the people I want to be around.
Right. And I think, or a good answer is, I did this and it was the wrong thing to do. That those types of answers are good. That shows, maturity. So,
what are you seeing from a trend in the country?
Yeah.
You're very much boots on the ground, not just in Colorado, but you're all over the place.
Right.
I mean, I know you mentioned you have a couple places in Louisiana, but I'm assuming, and this is an assumption, that with all the bad press coming out of places like San Francisco, which I definitely have a soft spot for. I spent over 7 years there, or over 6 years there, and I love that town and I love that city, and it's such a special place to me, but it's become something not so special recently. And there's just an amazing amount of talent in these places. Are you seeing any type of trends that are bringing people internal to the core of the country that I was like, oh my God, this amazing talent. How do we open more restaurants quickly, because there's so much more talent coming to places like Denver.
You know, you're seeing that in Denver. You know, Paul Key's here. Paul Key's probably top 10 chef in America. You know, the kids from Noisette, I think, are incredible. I think, you know, we're doing that project with Carlo LaMagna from Portland, who was 2021 Food and Wine Magazine's, you know, Chef of the Year, and you know, he's going to bring, you know, he's Filipino. He's going to bring his cuisine here, and we're partnering with him.
You are?
Yeah, right here, right up on the Crescent Novel building and near Rock Drill. So it's that big apartment building there.
Oh yeah. What neighborhood is that? Like, I don't even know.
It's Rhino. Yeah,
it is.
Yeah, it's like right behind Industry too. It's the building behind there. There's 483 units in that building alone, and then there's a couple other apartment buildings right around it. And
Got it.
You know, so there's quite a bit of development going up that way. And Rock Drill, you know, has been sold.
It's a gorgeous building.
Yeah, that's going to be. I think that'll eventually be the epicenter of Denver's nightlife. Yeah, I mean, that building is like iconic.
And the closest bar to there is Mary McLean's bar, right? Like, if you were to, like,
Yacht Club is close to there, as well as Rhino Beer Garden.
Yes,
is right there as well.
And that's on 38th and
so it's like 2 blocks up from that. Catbird has that rooftop.
I just wanted the listeners to kind of get like where we're talking about here. Yeah.
So, and we also have a rooftop cocktail bar going there, which is going to be a lounge similar to what you're talking about. Super vibey. It's got a 45-foot operable glass wall overlooking the mountains and the city. And I think
in the Rock Drill building you're talking about?
No, this is in the Novel building. So we had them knock out a couple penthouses and mitigate some sound, and I hope they did a good job of that, because it's not going to be quiet.
Sound mitigation.
But that's going to be incredible. That's going to be an absolutely incredible place to hang out. So.
And have you broke ground on that yet?
Oh yeah. Well, those will be open probably end of Q1 of 2024.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We got to hit you back on the show and talk about that.
Yeah, those are killer. And
is there
incredible.
Is there any other trends that you're noticing in the nationally? That
are you talking about trends within our business,
or just
restaurants
and hospitality,
the US,
like specifically related to Denver, and like maybe how Denver is potentially maybe benefiting from? I moved from San Francisco to Denver because the quality of life at that time was less expensive. The ability to grow was immense, and so I had a handful of reasons why I moved to Denver. Lifestyle was another one. But yeah, I mean, I think a trend could be how you manage your business, which is one great question, and then what you're seeing from just like a holistic standpoint of like this talent that you just mentioned.
Yeah, I think, you know, probably the thing that's not talked about with all this Michelin stuff, and
which I love your opinion about as well.
People have a lot of opinions about that, is the fact that it will attract, you know, high level talent to Denver that normally wouldn't consider it. A lot of great chefs that I talk to, you know, without having the ability to get a top 50 or without having it, that's what they're going after. So there's good and bad to that, right? I mean, so I think, but you know, I think that, but you know, pertaining to what you're saying in terms of like attracting the best talent, that conversation's a lot easier now than it was before, because everybody loves the idea of Denver. And
I think it's important how you just said that too. Loves the idea of Denver.
Correct. The reality and the idea are two different things.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I would say that we're going to see a lot more of that, you know, coming our way. We've started in recent years to see top talent leave San Francisco or New York to come to Denver. Because different things began to matter, you know, and I think COVID probably played a pretty large role in that, and we hadn't really seen that before, you know, here and there, but not the amount of people coming. So, you know, we get just inundated with inquiries from out of state. You know, I ran an ad for a director of operations and interviewed people in 30 states.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
That's pretty incredible. So, so from that perspective, I think people are coming to Denver, and I think now people are going to view Denver a little bit differently from a food perspective. I was just in Spain. People were really excited that Michelin was in Denver, in Colorado. So it was they knew about it. I walked into the Soho House in Barcelona, and they were talking about it. So you know, I mean, we're in different conversations already. So
globally, it sounds like.
Globally,
yeah,
without a doubt. Yeah, yeah.
How does that make you feel?
I think it makes me feel great. You know, I mean, I think, you know, again, there's balance in everything. So you have to take a look at all the factors, but you do want to be part of the conversation, and you do want to continue to push forward. And, you know, I actually would applaud Michelin for being as conservative as they were in this first round. Because
conservative in what way?
Just in terms of how many, there are definitely more restaurants in Colorado that are qualified for a star and for a bib and stuff like that. Right? We know that, right? But I think you got to be real careful the first time around, because I can tell you, if you can't handle the immense scrutiny, then you know that could go sideways fast. And I can tell, if you just hop on Reddit, hop on those things. I mean, we get just killed on Reddit, right? And it's like, but on other stuff, other platforms, people are super complimentary, right? You got to have some thick skin and be able to handle that type of stuff, you know? And I don't think everybody does. And I think people have to be real careful about that. So I think if you can, you know, I don't know if that's part of their thought process. I would imagine it would be. Because, you know, even when they went to Miami, I think they had 13 stars in a city that's 10 times the size of Denver, you know? I mean, you got to be careful with that stuff. You know, it's like the first of anything, you know?
Yeah.
So,
you know, it's such a tricky thing. So we got a couple Michelin stars in San Francisco, and the process of going through that was so intense on every level. It was rewarding when we received it, but the process and our decision-making process was much different during that period of time.
Yeah.
And that's what I worry about with things like Michelin, is because the process of someone that opens a mom and pop restaurant that wants to aspire to that, their intention of what it was when they first opened to what they want to be, and the recognition. It's like,
hey, you talked to Graham Elliott about that, and Merlin and those guys. You know, when they got 1 star at Graham Elliott in Chicago, and then they were like, you know what, let's go for 2, and they got the second. But everything changed, you know? And, but, you know,
I remember reading about that.
Yeah. There's an education process to that. And there's a philosophical process to that you have to like consider, you know? I don't open restaurants for Michelin. I open restaurants for the kids that work for me so that they have a life, you know?
So what if a guy like Corey Baker comes to you and is like, this is now my dream and goal is to attract a Michelin star, even though when we met and we started this process, Michelin wasn't in town.
Yep.
So like, how would you navigate a conversation like that? Because that's a real conversation, I'm assuming.
It's 100% a conversation. And if that's what his goal is, and we can agree upon, you know, how that fits into our culture, then I'm fine with that. But if we have to make decisions that are like counterintuitive to me, in terms of having a good workplace environment, then I'll probably walk away from that deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but not everybody's like that. I mean, Kelly Whitaker, you know,
he crushed it.
He crushed it. But his company is literally set up to do that.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I have a director of operations. Kelly Whitaker is a director of fermentation. Right. Yeah. I mean, like, you know, I mean, and he by the way, he deserved all of that, you know, and people are criticizing that. It's crazy. But
what are some of the criticisms? I read a couple things like nothing's really resonated with me with the criticisms.
The criticisms are really more, I think, people feeling like others got left out, and people's, you know, food's very personal, so people have opinions of restaurants, you know, like, you know, Jared Leonard, who's got AJ's Barbecue, which got a bib, right? Like a lot of times there you'll see, you know, people saying, well, if he was in Texas, he'd be closed, you know, stuff like that. And it's just like, what? He's not. He's in Colorado, and he does a great job, and he's a great guy, right? And he has a great staff, and and he works his ass off, you know? So, you know, they don't take those things into consideration. It's really easy to hide behind fake names online and things like that. You know, so, you know, like Mr. Rosso, I think, you know, we get criticism of, you know, maybe being too expensive, right? But I don't think people...
And Mr. Rosso?
Yeah, really? Some people think we're expensive, but they don't understand. Wow. They don't understand the sourcing and the ingredients. And
I mean, just look at the plate; it's gorgeous, and
yeah,
like, it's tasty.
And it's $30 a head, by the way.
Yeah, it's not even like
Seems
you
pretty
get a
reasonable
friendly
for a couple
smile.
drinks and,
It's like
you know,
you get a
night
smile
out.
at the front door.
But
the
because
plate
you
of-
hear tacos, you immediately think $2 tacos on the street.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Okay, so there's a perception, you know, a value that I think is is something, and people, you know, I think no matter what, love to see others fail. You know, I mean, look at it in sports, look at it in business. You know, we look for, I mean, we have an entire cancel culture, right? Some of which is just and some of which is absolutely crazy.
Most.
You know, a 16-year-old that makes a mistake as a kid, all of a sudden doesn't have a future anymore. You know, like it's crazy to me. But people like that stuff. And, you know, you just.
Breaks my heart.
I think you have to, look, it's what the rules of the game are now. So we've got to be able to deal with that. You know, so
do you have any strategies of dealing with that? Do you have any like mindset or strategy, or how do you put your armor on when it comes to stuff like that?
Yeah, I don't know that you put your arm around it so much as you stay focused on who you are and what you are. You know, I'm not, you know, calling meetings to talk about how people are talking about us on Reddit. You know, I mean, I don't care, right? What I do care about is.
Is Reddit a thing now? I mean,
it's a big thing. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. So I don't get on it too much, but it's pretty wild.
More than like Yelp. You haven't said Yelp or anything, but Reddit has been.
Yeah,
more...
I haven't looked at Yelp in probably 5 years.
Yeah, thank God.
Not even looked at it. I actually never minded Yelp because it was a way to engage with people. All right, fine. You gave me a negative review. Let me have an opportunity to rectify that. Come on in and we'll be friends. I will tell you something. The first negative Yelp review we ever got at Highlands Happenburger, her name was Laura Burl.
13 years ago.
Yeah. And she, rightfully so, basically gave us a star, being like they pulled a patio table in. It was during football, and they put us in the middle of all these high tops, and nobody could see us, and we couldn't get drinks and all this stuff. And I was like, oh wow, we really screwed this up, because that's exactly what happened. I was there.
Yeah.
And so I reached out to her, and her boyfriend at the time came in and sat at the bar, and we spent the day together. Fast forward 18 months later, Katie was a bridesmaid in her wedding, and she's been one of our best friends.
Man,
ever
that's
since.
So cool. I'm glad I got goosebumps with that. That's awesome.
And so, you know, you have to take accountability, and everybody loves redemption, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the greatest thing of all time. So, so I don't mind. You know, a negative review if it's justified.
Yeah.
Now, COVID brought out the crazies, right? Like, I mean,
now they're really behind their computer. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like Forget Me Not, which is, it's got to be the busiest cocktail bar in the country per square foot. I can't imagine there being a busier place than that.
And that's in Cherry Creek.
That's in Cherry Creek. But we didn't, you know, let people in who weren't vaxxed during COVID. And, you know, over in Cherry Creek, you've got a lot of entitlement. So, you know, I think if you took out all the negative COVID reviews, you know, it would be one of the better reviewed places in town.
Interesting. It's still affecting you.
Oh man.
Like your ultimate like.
Yeah, because you have like a party of 10 that comes in, and I'll never forget, we had this group from Kentucky, you know, there on business, and, you know, then they started like kind of throwing insults about like liberalism and all this type of stuff. And then all 10 immediately within like 5 minutes, all got on Google and just started. Yeah, you get a lot of that.
One thing I've been focusing on, not only in my life, my personal life, but in my in business, is that the idea of like not keeping track of the score, but playing the game, and keeping track of the score is just a distraction to your ultimate results of the game that you are choosing and wanting to play. It sounds like not paying attention to reviews as part of how is a strategy of how you don't, you know, keep score.
I don't let them get to
game,
me. We do want to engage. It is a point of engagement, and we are in a relationship business, so I do want to clarify that we want to engage no matter what.
Yeah.
You know, and because like when you think about, you know, you just made the analogy to a game. And I was an athlete growing up.
And you're a big sports Boston guy.
Yeah. And I can tell you that, like, for somebody that is as competitive as me, you know, losing sucks. But you typically get over it if you just got beat by somebody that was better. But if you didn't do everything you possibly could do to win, like I still remember games when I was 12 years old that I'm mad about. You know, I'll be 50 in November. You know, so you know, it's like one of those things. It's like, you know, how prepared were you, and did you do everything you possibly could to make it work to win, or in, you know, in our in our line of business is to make the relationship work. So if you're not engaging with some of this stuff online, obviously there's some stuff that's just okay, calm down,
forget about it.
But generally speaking, people want to be heard. And then, you know what? That's okay. It's like religion, right? I'm not a religious guy. My mother was a nun for 15 years before she met my father. She left the convent to marry my mother.
What does that look like? My God, that's an amazing. Wow, that's
and I'm son of political
that's a story
activists,
there.
And we didn't grow up with anything. And my mother is very religious. I am not religious, but it gives her comfort, so that's okay. If going on Yelp and leaving a negative review makes you feel good, then you go ahead and do that. But I'm still going to try to engage you and turn it around. Yeah,
that's amazing. What I have a question. It's super relevant, but it's also very personal. And feel free to not answer it. But I know you're pretty much an open book. When it comes to like opening a concept, and this concept is dear to you and has a place in your heart, and for whatever reason doesn't work.
Yeah.
What mechanisms come into place where you have to make a decision to change? Because I think you know which one I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, old majors. On Marin.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Marin.
That one specifically because that was a big ticket to open.
Well, we had a couple. So we have a couple examples of that, right? We had Old Major, which was more of a partnership issue, and then we had, and we just had to. Getting out of any kind of relationship is hard, whether it's a marriage or a business relationship.
Yes.
It's the same thing, right? It's like
it's almost emotional. It's tricky no matter what. There's legal documents. You got to sign your name. It's a big deal.
Marin was a lot easier for me. And I think it was really difficult for Max. And so for Marin, Marin was profitable. So it was making money. It was the hardest money we ever made. And when COVID hit, I do a lot of work as a first responder after hurricanes, earthquakes, things like that. I felt like I was very prepared to handle COVID. And we had a really good plan as a company. And part of that plan was to close the Marin Kitchen and partner with Adam Schlegel and Zach Newmeyer and Jen and Alex. And I think we did 700,000 meals to the community, and Marin was one of the kitchens that we used. And so I'm not sure if you're aware of this or not, but I worked at the federal level. I co-authored the white paper for the PPP loans. I worked with a bunch of senators and on that. And so,
did you insert yourself? Did you go after that, or did they come to you?
They came to me.
Okay.
Yeah, they came to me. So actually, Cory Booker came to me. Who's a Republican, and I'm a Northeast liberal, but he got put on the job because he was diagnosed or he was exposed and had to quarantine for 14 days. So we had 14 days in a hotel room in D.C. to work on it. So every single day we worked on that thing, and it was pretty crazy. So, but one of the things with Denver is it's a sanctuary city. Right. And we beat our chests and we're righteous and, we let people come here and work and it's a safe haven. Well, when COVID hits and you need federal funding, the Fed says, great, but we're not going to give you federal funding. And the city had no plan. So all of a sudden we had all these Mexican immigrants and Salvadorian, South American immigrants here, largely, that were working in restaurants that had no federal support. So for me, I was like, okay, well, we're not going to pay ourselves. Myself, Katie, Kevin, Max, we all took zero salary during COVID. We reallocated that cash, and we made sure that our people who, weren't getting any other federal support were employed and working during COVID as essential workers. So going out and feeding battered women's shelters and teen homeless shelters and first line responders, that was important. So that space at Marin was used for that because the kitchen was set up for that. And then as we were there, I was thinking to myself as we were, we didn't really know when all this craziness was going to end, but it was like, okay, do you think people are really going to want to sit down and have a brain aneurysm trying to figure out a menu? And they don't want tasting menus. They want to get together with their friends.
And this was a French
they want
concept.
To indulge. Yeah, Marin was French. It's actually Max's family name. So it was deeply personal for him. So that was a hard conversation, but Max is a super practical guy for an artist. Yeah, I think that's the right way to say it for an artist.
Yeah.
but
and especially the spirit and all that,
But
the brain.
We felt like we could do what A5's like a Japanese leaning steakhouse, but it's super chefy and there's a, if I mean, but there's a ton of French technique on, use all the sauce work and, so it satisfied his, creative juices and that's just kind of how we looked at that. Yeah.
And A5, where is this location we're talking about?
15th and Wazee. It's the old Wazee Supper Club.
Yeah.
So
are you engaging the upper spot, is that seating isn't there an upper spot?
Well, there's a mezzanine and then there's a second floor.
Okay, are you engaging the mezzanine at all?
Oh yeah, that's a really busy restaurant.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I got to get back in there. I was there when you first opened.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
It's
a great restaurant. So these guys have done a really good job. So, and then we own the building. So the second floor is like a accounting software company, I think, runs it out there. So,
we talked a little bit about some of the positives that Denver's seeing. Nationally through the restaurant hospitality lens, primarily from people coming out from these cities, what was at one point considered major influences in our industry, and now hopefully Denver can lead the way to the next wave of talent and be more recognized for the hospitality and concepts that we offer. Is there anything that's negative? I don't typically like to ask negative questions, but is there anything that we can look at and pay attention to? If you just opened a restaurant, what kind of advice? What kind of advice right now would you give young Juan Padró? If you were opening a concept like tomorrow, or if you have a concept that's already open, what's relevant right now that we should pay attention to if you aspire to do this?
Denver's probably the most expensive city in America to open a restaurant in.
Why is that?
I think, construction costs are super high, and it's not necessarily that they're higher than New York City, but the volumes in New York City justify it, and the volumes in Denver do not. So the actual
guest count is what you're saying. When you say volume, you're talking about the
actual economics of opening a restaurant in Denver. It's the hardest city in the country. Labor is extraordinarily expensive here, for what it is, and a big part of that is that Denver grew so fast. And it's a concern, right? Denver actually got less diverse over the last 5 years. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah.
But
I feel it here at Beacon.
It's crazy. And it's because we're pricing people out and we don't have a good, and that's why, when we talk about our activism and we talk about service charges and stuff, verifiable income matters because we have an affordable housing problem in Denver, right? But a big part of that shouldn't be. There's a very simple solution to that, right? If we're saying that we have 1 in 5 kids working in restaurants in the city of Denver, and their income isn't verifiable because they're not claiming their tips, right? They can't even get a car loan. They can't get approval for an apartment. So they have to live in low income, and they're taking low income apartments and they're making like 80 grand. That's a problem.
That's a big problem.
So we need verifiable income so that we understand what we are playing with so we can make decisions that benefit the people that need it in our society. Right. So I think Denver's got to figure that piece out. I think there's some things with the city philosophically that they really, really, really went the wrong direction. And the biggest thing is density along our public transportation. You go to New York or San Fran or anywhere, that's where all the density is. Right. You want people living where there's public transportation so that they can get to work.
Yes.
Right. And they don't have to own cars and all that type of stuff. Right. Well, we said, no, we're only going to let you build 8 stories. We should be building 50 stories, near our public transportation, right? And then that would create the density for the businesses to be successful and justify the high costs, right? It would also create a much more dynamic and diverse downtown, right? And then if we figure out the, how we're compensating our hourly tipped employees, right? And we can verify that. Then we can say, okay, well, this is really what the affordable housing problem is, which will still exist after that, by the way. But you're going to open up inventory, a ton of it, and you're going to be able to bring people into the city that are now getting pushed out to Aurora, right? So it's really a crazy little problem that we have here.
And that comes from the owners of these establishments, not or putting the employee in a position to be able to do that.
Well, the problem with independent restaurants is that it's just that, right? We're all independent. We want to do it our own way. And one of the things COVID, I hope, taught us was that we weren't organized. So we got beat up the most because we didn't have each other's back, right? And we got organized, and we ended up having each other's back at the end. It was a beautiful thing to see, but we didn't have any lobbyists, and we didn't have anybody speaking on our behalf, and nobody knew. You know, we had all these guys in D.C. that had no idea what our business was about.
It seemed like there was a lot of internal bickering amongst what were friends before COVID.
Yeah.
And there was a weird division that I felt like happened for a short period of time.
Sure.
During that.
It was emotional.
Yeah.
You know? But ultimately what we know, and being in the business we're in, is that when you find commonality, you solve problems, right? Because people generally, when everybody is face to face and, you know, we understand their intentions, if the intentions are all good, we can find common ground, and that's typically going to happen around a dinner table, you know. So, so that's another thing. But yeah, I mean, I think Denver, you know, is in a pretty precarious position right now.
Yeah.
You know, they've nobody seems to understand how to help the homeless.
And he's asking for something like $14+ million to throw at this. And I say throw intentionally.
He's a nice guy. I like Mike. You know, I voted for Kelly. I thought she was more qualified for the job, which, and that's not to say Mike's not going to do a good job. I was incredibly disappointed with the city of Denver that in 2023, a woman's more qualified than a man for a job, and there is no metric where she wasn't more qualified. 100% of the metrics, she was more qualified for it, and she'd been an executive, and she didn't win. So Denver isn't the biggest thing with Denver is that it isn't who it says it is, and it needs to accept its identity and grow. So
yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah,
and it's tough to be a part of, especially when you and I are more boots on the ground. We own these businesses and see the results of a lot of these decisions that are being made that we don't have influence over. Yeah,
and we don't, you know, our young kids need to vote, you know, and every generation says that, but, you know, our city council has really damaged the city with some of the decision making. And, you know, you got 15,000 people that show up to a vote for city council in a city the size of Denver.
You know, the crazy thing, it's like, and voting, like going and voting. Like would you feel comfortable like putting $500 in an envelope and mailing it to yourself and hoping you receive that $500 in the mail, right? Well, would you feel comfortable with your vote if that's what it came down to? It's like, go to the polls and vote. Even one step further, I know it's a lot to ask. But
I don't
anyway,
know. Yeah. I mean, you can mail your vote in as far as I'm concerned. I mean,
as long as you do it, I guess is like what you're saying. Yeah.
And you know, I mean, some of the decision making. It's funny, like, you know, we had this scheduling, you know, controversy where city council in Denver wanted to require restaurants to guarantee hours, and if the employee called off, the restaurant still had to pay X amount of hours for them to work. You know,
nightmare.
And it's just like, you know, and I talked to some of the city council members, and one of them, whose family are dear friends of mine, you know, she says to me, well, I understand restaurants, I worked in them. Okay. Well, no, you don't, clearly, you know, because you can't do that. But, you know, labor's gone up 45% in the last 4 years for Denver restaurants, 45%. Now you factor in inflation.
Yep.
Okay. And the cost of getting open, it doesn't make sense. Like some of the big Chicago,
have your prices increased 45%?
No, and that's the perception of value thing, right? I mean, like, and
yeah, of course, you know, they haven't.
So, you know, I am worried for independent restaurants in the city of Denver.
Yeah, me too.
You know, I think if you're a sit down restaurant and you're not doing a minimum of $3 million in sales, which, by the way, the average restaurant in Denver does 2.5. If you're not doing $3 million in sales, you're losing money. You're losing money because of that. And it did, and the increase to bucket McDonald's and Fruition and say they're the same type of business is the height of irresponsibility. Okay. And so you have to understand that we have to figure out how to categorize and have rules in place, because we want to take care of our people. But all we did was hurt our most vulnerable, because if you got to keep increasing the tipped minimum wage when they're already making $40 an hour, $50 an hour, guess who gets the brunt of that? The back of the house. who are our most vulnerable, right? All of a sudden you can't continue to raise them up, you know? And then our overtime laws are archaic. Like, I have 12 concepts, as we said earlier, right? If I have a kid working at Bardot and I have a kid working at Highlands Happenburger, right? And the kid at Bardot, came here from Mexico and, has been throwing pies and works 40 hours a week at Bardot, but has to have 2 jobs, okay? He's an immigrant. My dad is from Puerto Rico. Same thing. He had to work a ton. I get it. He's going to work 2 jobs. Some of these guys are going to work 3 jobs, right? Mm-hmm. He can't work in my company. He has to go outside of my company to get a job. Otherwise, because there's common ownership, we've got to pay time and a half on that.
Oh, interesting.
Right? For overtime. Why is that the case? That only hurts people.
Yeah.
Right? Because I pay more than somebody else. They got to go take a lesser paying job for their second job than what they would have with me.
Oh, fuck.
Right?
Yeah.
And they don't get the benefit of the continued investment and training that you're getting in my organization to go to another organization. They want to work there. They can't. They're being told that they can't. That makes no sense. And because I pay my people so much because of the service charge, right? My dishwashers make $24 an hour. Dishwashers, okay?
Congrats.
And,
That's an amazing
our
thing
line
to say.
cooks are into the 30s an hour. Our servers are all in the high 30s to mid 50s an hour, depending on the concept and stuff like that, But our back of the house guys make a lot more money too because we share the service charge with the back. You can't share tips with the back of the house, so those guys get screwed, right? Service charge is income that comes to the business. We can allocate it,
distributed, redistribute,
right? Mm-hmm. And because we have the increase in the minimum wage, we can allocate a little bit more to the back of the house because of that. So those guys are making good income. But if I pay overtime because it's income that comes to the business, a dishwasher overtime is $38 an hour for me.
It's mind-blowing.
Yeah. So that doesn't make sense for a small business, right? So tax code's screwed up. So I just think we need to, kind of put the brakes on and take a good look at an industry that is, 20% of your workforce in Colorado. You just brought Michelin here, and all of a sudden you're going to put all your independent restaurants out of business, right? Let's figure out a way to get this going. I would argue fruition shouldn't pay taxes at all. Why is an art museum, why is that tax-free, receive a tax benefit? Are you telling me that Alex Seidel, who buys everything in the local ecosystem, so he's creating jobs in rural Colorado, which is like the #1 initiative for the governor of Colorado. He buys from dairy farmers and bread makers, and local buys his meat from local ranchers and everything like that. He's putting his money back in here, knowing it's going to cost more, but doing it because it's the right thing to do. Why is he paying the same taxes as North in Cherry Creek, which sends everything in a big bag that they just...
Yep.
That's fucked up.
Back up the Cisco truck, yeah.
So,
do you see yourself in more of an activist role?
I mean, that's what I do.
You do that now currently, but do you see evolving that part of your...
I mean, I was asked to run for office by some families. I probably don't have an interest in that. But, I really love what I'm doing, and I love the kids I work with every day. And but I'm still super active locally and nationally, and actually internationally. We just hosted 2,000 mayors from all over the Americas in Colorado at the end of April. I co-hosted it with the State Department. We had a cultural component to it. This is called the Biennial of the Americas, which is something that Colorado's leading the charge all over the Americas with. And it's all about fostering creative economies and sustainable and environmentally sound economies. So I'm actually going to Santiago, Chile, with Mayor Johnston and a bunch of 80-person delegation at the end of October, meeting with the mayor of Santiago, who's a 32-year-old young woman she's a socialist, but socialism's working there. We're likely going to meet with the president of Chile. Same thing we did Mexico City last year. Met with Claudia Sheinbaum, who's going to be the first female president in Latin America, which is incredible. There's 2 women running for president in Mexico. That's it. They're the only 2 candidates. So you're going to get one.
You're guaranteed.
You're guaranteed. And Claudia's been the mayor of Mexico City, city of 30 million people for the last 12 years. Murder rate's gone from 6.5 a day to 1.8 under her. She's built 2 hospitals, 3 universities, gondola system from the poorest neighborhoods to the wealthy neighborhoods for people to work. Damn. Like Mexico City is so far ahead of any American city culturally, it's not even close.
How do you stay up to date with all this stuff? Like your wealth of knowledge, brother. Like what? How do you stay up on all this?
Because it's important to we talked about travel and empathy. It's important to get out and understand. We have a lot to learn from Mexico, a lot. So you walk down the street in Mexico City, and there's flags from every Latin American country saying you're our brothers and sisters. You're welcome. You ever see that in American City? Now we say stay out. The fuck is that?
Yeah. That's wild. Is there anything you can ask? This will be my last question. Anything you can ask from a guest perspective when they go and enjoy restaurants, and obviously they have enough monetary resources to enjoy a restaurant, but is there anything you can like a direct ask for customers in restaurants, guests in restaurants when they enjoy a restaurant, things to look at or appreciate or anything like that? Because that's where all of this money is coming from,
Yeah,
not all of this money, but that's where that's how we're able to do the things that we do.
Yeah.
Speaking for you.
I view everything as deeply personal. When I go to a restaurant, food is personal to me, and my experience is personal. And I think if, I know people go out to eat for different reasons, just look at the categories of our restaurants, right? Highland Tap, it's like, all right, I'm going to bring my kids in. I got to get out of here in like 45 minutes, right? I don't want to go to Chili's. I want to go to an independent place. So, whereas like A5, the expectation is a little bit different. And I say that, and that's only half true. And so this is going to be the answer to your question, is like, understand that, when you go and experience an A5 for us, right? And, and you want to experience our other restaurants, right? And then you walk into a Mr. Oso, and the service model is different at Mr. Oso than it is at an A5, appropriately so from a restaurant perspective. But guests oftentimes hold the Mr. Oso kids to the same standard that they hold the $125 a head A5 kids. And I think that having some perspective about that is important.
Expectation, perspective.
Yeah,
those 2 words.
And understanding, everyone should always come from a position of like, intention. What is this person's intention? What is this business intention? What is And I think that if we viewed things that way as guests in restaurants, I think it would make things a little bit easier for the restaurant, and also it would probably take less stress off you as a guest's shoulders as well, knowing that the person you're supporting is trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, and the restaurants we're talking about, a lot of them have these pre-meetings before customers even arrive. And one of the things that we would always talk about, and as you know, I own Lower 48, and one of the things we always talked about, if there was a special occasion, people are driving sometimes from across town to enjoy your restaurant, and sometimes it's snowing outside, sometimes it's raining outside, sometimes it's there's an argument amongst each other, and just like recalibrating and really checking in with yourself is one thing I would I strongly encourage guests of restaurants in any environment, really, that you're spending money at a independently run business, that check in with yourself and see what kind of day you've had, and see what kind of mood you're in.
Yeah.
And try not to let that influence whomever's taking care of you, Yeah,
I think that's a big part of it. I'm gonna go back to a common topic on the service charge for one other thing because you just reminded me of it. The other thing about setting a floor is that, like, our young women, look, statistically, if you have brown or black skin, or if you're Asian, or if you're gay, you make less tips than a white person, right? That data is very clear, not arguable, right? Our young women, oftentimes in restaurants, are put in a position where they feel like they have to dress a certain way, talk a certain way, act a certain way to get an extra couple of bucks. Maybe they're a single mom, and that matters, right? So if we set the floor at 20%, we're giving the power back to the vulnerable person in the position. And if somebody wants to leave an extra tip, by all fucking means. Yeah. Thanks. Appreciate it. Not required. Yep. But if you get great service, which is what you should be tipping on, not, bare minimum, how scantily dressed somebody is, then great. it.
It's awesome. Well, this has been amazing talking with you, and I just can't thank you enough for what you brought to Denver and how you've showed up for our brothers and sisters in the industry and other owners, and what is not only currently but hopefully eventually just more and more keeping what we do to the forefront of our political leaders that need to hear our voice through your lens. And I think that's really important.
We just all got to get together and be a little bit more committed to that, as an industry, so it's not going to be like, I'm one person, but, I think, anybody that's a business owner, in my estimation, is a leader in the community. And, and I think just getting together and having a common voice and a common goal, I think would be really, really, really important. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.